by first of all welcoming Amber Hyams, who is our Young Film Programmers presenter today, who's going to be running the interview. Hi, Amber. Where are you?
Hi.
Hey, hello. Thank you so much for coming today. A little bit about Amber. So Amber was a young film programmer at Watersprite Film Festival, which is the largest student film festival in the UK, based in Cambridge. Worked with the team there for 3 years, but then graduated and has gone abroad to South America, has launched an international screenplay competition, has produced various plays, but very interestingly has come back to getting paid employment as the Watersprite Film Festival producer, which is in itself a really fabulous story of what happens if you step on the young programmer journey. So welcome, Amber. It's really fabulous to have you today.
Thank you. I'm very excited to be here and talk to Astrid.
Fantastic. And so I'd like to introduce Astrid now. Astrid, if you put your screen on, Astrid Goldsmith has the most fabulous backdrop, which is like 100 times better than mine, which says a lot about her work as a stop motion animator. Absolutely beautiful. And thank you so much for joining us today. A little bit about Astrid before we start the interview. So Astrid, as I said, is a stop motion animator, has had a very checkered, interesting career before that as well, which we'll find out more later. But also she has been selected for the BFI BBC 4 animation talent scheme and is at the moment developing a feature-length animation. So that's a kind of big transition that she's in, but she's kind of reached the heights through partly this amazing animation called Quarantine, which like the lines go, angry animals. I'm not sure that's the best way to describe it, but the film won the best short animation at London Short Film Festival and is the third most watched animated film on BFI Player. So we are absolutely over the moon to have you today, Astrid, to talk a bit about working in animation and all the in-between bits about creativity as a DIY maker, as well as working in kind of big budget productions. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Amber for the interview. Oh, sorry, I should ask you, Astrid, to quickly introduce yourself. I've sort of brushed past that.
Well, you've given me a really great introduction, so thank you so much. And yeah, just really excited to be here, and just a big hello from Folkestone to all the participants. Yeah, really excited to have this chat.
Awesome. So me too. I'm going to sit back now and let Amber get on with it. See you at 5 o'clock.
Okay, so as Julia says, I'm Amber. I'm the producer of Watersprite Film Festival, and I use the pronouns she, her. I'm wearing a black top in a blue room, and I'm really excited to get the opportunity to talk with Astrid today, as I'm sure you all are, to hear what she has to say. I thought we'd kind of start off with quite a broad question, but quite an important one. There are so many different roles in animation. Can you explain for our audience what actually your job is?
Sure, yeah. Also because I'm an independent animator, really I'm a writer-director, but I'm also an animator, and there are many things that go kind of under that umbrella, because with independent animation you end up doing a lot of the jobs yourself. So I started as a model maker. I still do model making puppets and sets and props for my films, but I also write my films, I storyboard my films, I direct my films, I also do kind of the art direction and the animation itself, which as part of that there's cinematography, and do a bit of like post, like VFX, and yeah, kind of manage the post-production, like and then but mainly writing and directing. They're kind of they're the big things.
But also basically doing it all, which is quite very impressive. How did you get to where you are today? What were the kind of big career steps for you? Is it something that you always knew you wanted to do, or was it kind of like a decision you made sort of somewhere along the line to go into animating?
So I started animating when I was about 12, just with like a Super 8 camera in my bedroom. And so I was just sort of like messing around with it then. I started making models, like Fimo models, when I was about 4. So I'd sort of been making it all throughout my childhood, like making stuff. And then I started making those things move in like my early teens. And then I did a theory BA, so English and Film Studies, and then after that I did a animation MA at Norwich Art School, as it was then, and alongside both my BA and my MA, I was doing a puppet making course. So I did 2 City and Guilds in puppet making alongside my degrees, because Norwich has an amazing puppet theatre. So I was sort of studying theatre and film kind of alongside each other, and learning lots of different types of puppet making. And so from then I kind of fell out of love a bit with animation during my MA, just because I had taught myself how to animate, and I was very used to kind of being in creative control of my work, and not letting the technology get in the way too much. And I found that because I was shooting on film, you know, so I was shooting blind. And then when I did my MA, because I was using video assist for the first time, so you can see what you're shooting as you go, I just found that really kind of radically changed my relationship to the work. And I was working with people who wanted to do like retakes, and for me, it kind of killed the magic a lot. And it stopped being about kind of personal expression and acting, and more about just sort of, you know, trying to attain perfection, which is not my way of working. So I sort of left animation for quite a few years, and I went into commercial model making. So I was still working within animation, so I was doing model making for animation, but I was also doing model making for kind of live action films and adverts and music videos, doing kind of all sorts, you know, kind of like horror special effects, to kind of massive soft toys for adverts, and, you know, all sorts of things. And then I kind of really got a craving to get back into building my own worlds. And so I then started making my own short film kind of on the side of all this other work.
Okay, well, I mean, wow, that is quite a journey. So it was the kind of storytelling element that brought you back, like wanting to get back into your own kind of world. So when you're, I guess, like then and now, like when you're kind of starting a project, what kind of comes first? Is it that like desire to have, do you have like an idea in your head about like a specific world that you want to put a story into and create, or does the narrative come first? Does the sort of character come first? How do you kind of begin anywhere?
I think with all of my short films, it's kind of sparked generally from news stories. So I'll read something or see a news story, and it will just kind of suggest something to me. So with Squirrel Island, there were lots of news stories around. So there was this like conservation policy where it was actually illegal to let a grey squirrel go if you had caught it. So if you captured a grey squirrel, you had to kill it. Like it was kind of illegal to let it go. It was really nuts. And like then I watched this documentary about a guy, like some kind of landed gentry in the north, like on the border of Scotland, who employed this guy who personally shot like 20,000 grey squirrels. You know, like there's just all this stuff which, you know, when you start thinking about it, like it just all kind of seems really crazy and like a sci-fi film. So yeah, so that and similarly with Quarantine, it was sort of suggested by the news stories that post-Brexit there were going to be like all the kennels were going to be really full because pet passports, the EU pet passports, were going to be no longer applicable in the UK. So then I just started thinking about, you know, what that would mean for wildlife and what that means for kennels and what that means if you live in a border town, like I live in Folkestone, which is a border town where the Eurostar comes in, Eurotunnel is. So yeah, and I just started thinking about all of those things and thinking about the kind of about allegory and parallels with kind of you know, human life, like you know, with quarantine there's obvious parallels with you know, detention centres, you know, for asylum seekers, and you know, so yeah, that it kind of comes from, it generally comes from kind of news stories and thinking about things in terms of allegory, and then thinking about, yeah, kind of the world that I want to create within that.
That's amazing. So when you think about the sort of specific like characters and figures within those worlds, how do you kind of start that process? Is it sort of based on drawing first, or kind of different processes of making? Like, where would you begin with that? And kind of when you've got a character, like how do you bring such like expression? And I mean, lots of your works have, you know, incredible movements and the sort of very distinctive looks and sort of gestures. How do you start and sort of go around creating characters like that?
Well, I think I mean, yeah, so it will start with research and sketches. So I'll do lots and lots of visual research, and I'm kind of doing that all the time, like, you know, going to museums, going to galleries, you know, looking at collections of things that I'm interested in. I kind of collect old toys. I'm really interested in that, you know, all that kind of stuff. And then, yeah, I'll start the drawing process. I mean, I think but you know, there are so many limitations with stop motion puppets that you start drawing and creating, and then you realize that, you know, they have to move a certain way, they have to be light, you know, all this stuff. So for example, with Red Rover, which is my last film, it was set on Mars, and the main characters are like rocks, basically they're rock beasts. And so I was trying to kind of figure it out and try and work out what the main characters would look like, and the fact that they would have to, you know, have a certain range of movement and have to kind of emote, and, you know, all of those, you know, all of those things, but they need to look like rocks, which are immobile, and you know, they also need to kind of fly through the air, so they need to be light, and yeah, so that, like, all of those things were real challenges that you just kind of sketch and sketch and sketch, and then you sometimes, like, if you can't figure out on the page, like, sometimes it's easier to kind of start making stuff and doing test models. So I'll start doing that. But yeah, I think that I've always been really influenced by kind of early, like sort of like Czech and Polish and Russian animation. So particularly like Yuri Trinka, Bratislav Poja, like people who kind of came from a tradition of puppet making, like carved wooden puppet making, in countries with an incredibly rich tradition of puppet theatre. And a lot of the time they would have just fixed faces, and it was just the body language and the lighting and the sound that would create that moment and that emotion. And there's something I just find really beautiful and simple about that. And so I've tried to kind of carry that through into my work and not have too many moving parts. I mean, obviously the, you know, financial constraints dictate that sometimes as well. I think with quarantine, I worked out that, because it was a very small budget, I think I worked out that I had like £9 per puppet. So it just had, you know, I had to just be really creative and just use like very, very cheap materials and not have, like, you know, not have intricate mechanisms in the head that, you know, where you insert an Allen key in the ear and the mouth opens or anything, you know, I couldn't build anything like that. So yeah, it just had to be super simple. I just worked out the system where I just carve eye sockets from balsa wood, pop the eyes in, and then like have like epoxy putty rings that sit on the top to kind of hold them in. I mean, it was just so, yeah, kind of very basic, but yeah, it worked.
Oh, it definitely works. It's amazing. I mean, in quarantine, I would say in particular, but I mean, it seems important in all of them. Sound seems like another really crucial component. And I guess I was just wondering, do you think of sound and like what you know, maybe what the overall score is going to be like while you're thinking about all of this other stuff, or is sound really something that comes afterwards, like with the edit?
So I have a very close working relationship with my composer, because he is my partner, so he lives upstairs, and works upstairs rather, and so a lot of the time when I'm after I've drawn the storyboard and I'm thinking at storyboard level kind of how I want some sound effects to influence the action, and then I'll put together an animatic from the storyboard, which is a kind of very rough version of the film, basically cut together in the time, and then with basic sound in there. So at that point, I'll get my composer to do kind of scratch sound and like a temp track. So yeah, kind of like from that point, I am thinking about it, but when I'm animating, I'm not really thinking about it that much, and then it's only when I've got the rough cut that it will go to Craig, and he will then score the whole film, and then there'll be like a lot of back and forth. And the same with my sound designer. You know, we might have like a meeting during animation just to talk about stuff, but really all the decisions get made in post-production.
Okay, and is that, I mean, so now obviously you're working on a longer sort of feature length animation. Is that level of I guess that level of control that you have as the sort of animator of making all these decisions, is that something that has changed working in this longer format and with more people involved? And yeah, I guess in general, like how are you finding that dynamic rather than sort of with a partner upstairs?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's really hard. Like the transition to feature, I'd say, is like just a lot harder than I'd anticipated, actually. I thought, you know, because I've made, you know, a bunch of short films, and they're actually quite long short films, like Squirrel Island was 21 minutes. Like it's, you know, it's not that short, and it took years and years. But I think the process of development for feature is really different and much more challenging in a different way. I think because I've always had a great deal of creative control in the writing and development of shorts, and that's the bit I really love. Like I really love that kind of that period of like really open creative thinking where you're just inventing and working problems out and thinking about things and just putting all the fun stuff you want in there. But I think with feature development, because so I'm developing with the support of BFI Film Fund, and I'm working with you know, their development executive and their script consultant, and then I'm working with a co-writer and our script editor and a producer. And so there's lots of voices in there, which is brilliant because it means that you get to really put your idea through its paces, but it's also torture because you're just, you know, iterating and just going over and over, and it gets a lot worse before it gets better. And I feel like I'm really at the kind of maybe at like the lowest point right now with the development, where I just kind of feel like, well, I don't know if I can write anymore. Like I just, but I do, you know, I think that there's definitely a really, really good fun film in there, and I just need to kind of, there are just steps that you have to go through with development, which kind of means that you're just very rigorous with your idea. And hopefully it will mean that it's a good film at the end of it.
I'm sure it will be. Are you finding the idea and like the process of sharing your work kind of before you might think it's ready? Like, is it that's difficult? Whereas before you could kind of, I mean, I guess it's sort of another question, but like if you were sort of working on a project for years and years and then sharing it, rather than sort of having to be in a room with people giving feedback when even it's not ready, is it that kind of dynamic that's tricky, going from sort of shifting from DIY into more kind of large scale animation, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a few things. I mean, I'm naturally kind of not that into like sharing anything until I've got the final product. And certainly like with Squirrel Island, I kept the production almost a complete secret, even from, like friends and stuff. And it was a different time because it was, I started working on it like over 10 years ago. So there was, the kind of social media landscape was very different, and there wasn't the same kind of expectation around, kind of sharing every stage or whatever. So yeah, and I think I really enjoyed that, like keeping it to myself and just being able to create something where I was just thinking about what makes me laugh or what makes me happy or what I'm interested in and all of those things. Whereas I think with development for features, I mean, yes, you have to share before you're ready, but it's more about the fact that at the moment, there are stages that you have to go through that they have to sign off. And so you have to get a treatment ready, you have to get your treatment signed off before you can go to script, and then you have to get your script ready before you can go to storyboarding. And for me, I feel like I do my best thinking at storyboard level when you can combine images and dialogue, if you have it or whatever, where you can show what you're thinking visually. Whereas if you're writing a treatment, it's just so easy to get kind of bogged down in words, bogged down in just, writing a paragraph describing something where you could just show it in one picture, or just a series of moments, which is, where you can suggest something much more beautifully and elegantly than writing it. So, yeah, I think it's a few things. I think, the development of animation features is probably really different to live action features. So in a way, development never ends. There's lots of stories from all animation studios where they're kind of, they throw scenes out right before post, and they reanimate and rewrite everything, and things that you can't do with a live action feature where like the actors have left 2 years ago and that stuff. But it's a learning process.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it sounds like it. Are you doing, I mean, I don't know if you'll want to share this, so feel free to sort of answer slightly to the side of the question, but are you doing anything kind of to the side of that, or is it taking up too much time? Like, are you still doing any of the kind of DIY sort of, being creative for yourself, or like learning for yourself, or is it kind of all sort of efforts going into this bigger project?
No, there's always the side. So at the moment, my big side project, which actually isn't really my side, it's my kind of my main project, is so I'm drawing a graphic novel, which is going to be published in April next. Well, no, it's due to be published next year in 2024 sometime. But my deadline is April 2024. So I've got a whole book to draw. So yeah, that's kind of taking up a lot of my creative energy. And then I'm also working on like more of an art project, which I can't really talk about. And then also for the last, I finished now, but for most of last year, I was working as a staff writer on a Netflix show. So I was kind of doing that part-time as well. So yeah, there's kind of always a lot going on.
keeping very, very busy then.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I think this might have to be my final question before I have to hand back to Julia, but I think a lot of our listeners today and audience will be, or some probably will be filmmakers or animators or sort of people who are aspiring to be animators. And I guess I was wondering if you had any advice in general about what to do once you have some content. Like, how do you share it with the world? What are the best festivals that people can submit their work to? And yeah, how, because obviously a lot of, particularly at the beginning, a lot of work will be, as you were saying, people working by themselves. Do you have any advice about how to get out there and share what you're doing?
Yeah. Number one, never call your work content. Because it's not, it's art. I mean, I think there are a few different routes, and I can just talk about mine, because that's, you know, it's what I know. Because obviously you can just put your work online and you know, grow your audience, and that's great. I think I still have faith in kind of the film festival system, and I kind of, yeah, so my route was that I looked at all of the BAFTA and Oscar qualifying film festivals. You can find that on the BAFTA website, and then I entered all of those film festivals, or you know, as many as I could afford. And then if you get into film festivals, the most important thing is to go and to talk to as many people as you can when you're there. So I mean, not in a kind of like weird stalky way, but just, you know, make the most of those opportunities, like go to those really awkward networking sessions, force yourself to talk to people, be normal and nice, or whatever, and yeah, and then connections happen, because I found that nearly all of the like professional connections that I've made, you know, producers who've given me jobs, and other like animators and creatives who I've worked with and collaborated with on my films, like I met all of those at film festivals when I was touring with Squirrel Island mainly, and a bit of Quarantine as well. So yeah, I'd say that's like a really, really good route. And the other thing is that I found really helpful was I did a screen skills course, like a short 3-week course in writing for children's television, animated television, and learned so much on that. And you know, it's a free course, and you know, you get like so much information, and then at the end we did a networking Zoom, and I met producers who gave me a job. So you know, I think it's just really, really like take advantage of those things. And I think, you know, also you know, keep learning. Like don't think just because you've graduated from your course or you've done one thing that you kind of, that's it, and that you should therefore know everything that you need to know. Because I think, you know, throughout my career I've gone and done like various short courses, you know, whether it's like practical like film courses, or you know, kind of related courses like you know, drawing or whatever it is, because I think that, you know, even if it doesn't even seem that related to what you're doing, I think the process of learning something, of opening yourself up to a new creative skill, and that kind of really amazing like buzzy feeling you get from learning is so invaluable, and will just enrich your process and your work. And I think, yeah, that would be my tip.
Well, I think that's a pretty good note for me to say goodbye on, and reintroduce Julia, who will be taking the questions from all the audience. Thank you so much, Astrid.
Thank you.
Thank you both so much. That is so inspiring. The amount of different sort of skills you have, and the amount of different jobs you've got on the go, but also that thing that finishing to say is the learning. I mean, it's evident that you love learning, and you can cope with being out of your comfort zone. And I think that's I've really taken from that you're still exploring. It's not a sort of like hard ass industry that you're like always thinking about the bottom line and the money, but that your pleasure and love of the art form is just seeps out of that. So it's absolute pleasure listening. I've got questions, but there are questions in the Q&A, and I'd like to invite anyone else, all the participants, to throw your questions in now, because we've got 25 minutes to answer them. So the first question, which kind of follows up from what you were just saying, is from an anonymous attendee. Did you have prior work experience before your degree? And I'd like to sort of add on that, you've talked about picking up sort of learnings from lots of different places. Maybe you could include some of the more unexpected places that aren't necessarily the National Film and Television School. So yeah, what prior work experience did you have before your degree? And then maybe in the in-between times, I'll expand that question.
I mean, nothing related, nothing. So I had jobs, when I was a teenager at school. So yeah, but just the most normal Saturday job. Like I worked in Clark's children's shoe department. I guess that taught me how to sit on the floor and measure some children's feet and not get kicked in the face. I mean, it's, and yeah, like just, I worked in shoe shops and like hotels and stuff like that. Yeah, I mean, I did a lot of retail, and I think like on the side of so like my first like commercial industry job after graduating my MA was I went into the prop workshop of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy and worked there for 6 months, but after I came out of that, I went back into retail. So I was running a art supply shop that was like a specialist art supply shop for sculptors. So we were selling like clay and wax and tools and all sorts of things like that. And I worked there for 8 years alongside doing, like commercial model making jobs. And I think actually it's like, in a way that is work experience. Like I know it's not being a runner for a production company or whatever. It doesn't sound like the most direct route in, but it taught me so much about model making, about materials, and therefore kind of how materials behave and how you can choose materials for your job and all of those things, because I got to experiment. It was like a free school, because you got to experiment with all your materials that we were selling so that you knew what you were talking about. And so I basically taught myself like mold making in the basement of that shop. And you were like troubleshooting for customers. So it's like so you were talking to people about their projects day in, day out, and just broadening your knowledge of kind of what, way people are working and different projects. It's just, yeah, it's kind of, I mean, it wasn't glamorous or, it was, you had to deal with like complete weirdos most of the time, but it was really interesting. And I think it's, yeah, like, I think in that sense, like in a way, everything is experience and is helpful.
Yeah, I mean, that's really interesting. Lots of young programmers, lots of people that we've talked to who are in the industry have had a job in a cinema at some point. Nearly all of them we've interviewed actually. And so, again, it's quite a lowly job being front of house. It's not very well paid, but they learn so much about the audience. I think it's really interesting you're saying working in the art shop, you learn so much about the materials.
Yeah.
So actually, there's a kind of apprenticeship that you can create for yourself.
Yeah.
And then, the model making, just to say, so you didn't carry on with that. Many people might have stopped there, because that, you very successful, so why did you stop at that? I mean, why didn't you stop there?
Why didn't I,
stop as a model maker?
Why didn't I stop as a model maker?
Yeah, why did it then go on from there to new heights?
So you mean like why?
So you've been in the shop.
Yeah.
and then you were working as a model maker, and you were learning all these processes and so on. And then, some people would say you got the job in the model, the industry model making, not your own stuff in your basement. Many people would see that as making it,
Well, and I do love it. I think I just got to the point where it just felt like I was just spending so much of my time and energy kind of building things, making things that sometimes I liked and sometimes I really didn't like aesthetically, but you're pouring all this energy, you're pouring the same amount of energy into something whether you like it or not, and you're kind of spending all this time building other people's worlds. And it got to the point where I just felt like I need to put something out there that's like completely my vision and build my own worlds. And so I just, it was a kind of, I didn't know beforehand. There's no way to know how that transition is going to go. But basically, as soon as I released Squirrel Island and it started playing festivals, suddenly I was an animator. Like suddenly I was an animation director and I wasn't a model maker anymore. And I started getting animation jobs. And it's just that thing, isn't it? Of like, I guess that's why I picked Amber up, it's so mean, on the word content, just because it's that thing of like, you have to believe that what you're making is your own art, and it's a film, or it's whatever it is, an ident or whatever it is, and it's something that you're making for a purpose, and you have to really believe in it, because then you'll put that out in the world and people will respond to your belief and passion in it, rather than just doing an exercise. Like, people send me their show reels a lot, like, because I get people, looking for work experience and stuff like that. And, the best show reels that I get are the ones with kind of, weird films that people have just made, and actually I'm not, like, I think that it's obviously good to see those sort of exercise, animation exercises that everyone gets given at school, at art school, whatever, like, but it doesn't really show, it doesn't tell you anything about the person, doesn't show anything about them. It just means that they've learnt a lesson, by rote in a way, and they've excelled at that, and that's brilliant. But it's in a way, I'm much more interested in like people's ideas.
And that's fascinating, but it's interesting also, lots of young filmmakers go into it with the ideas first, but you had the kind of apprenticeship at which point to come off. Anyway, I'm talking too much. So following on from that, another anonymous attendee, so I think it links, how do you stay motivated in the long process of animating? Is that connected to that answer?
Yeah, I think that's really all about the idea. And I think that because my films, I've always been, I kind of see my films as like a platform for me to talk about things that are really important to me. And so those ideas and themes have to feel kind of big and important to me, important enough to sustain my interest and belief for some years. So I guess it probably is quite difficult to keep yourself motivated if you're doing work for somebody else, or if it's kind of like a throwaway joke that then doesn't become that funny like 8 months in or whatever. But I think if you really, really believe in the reason for making the work, the idea behind it, and you're not following trends, so it's not going to change, then I think then you will keep the motivation. I think day-to-day motivation is much harder, because there's always, temptation and distraction. I think just getting yourself into your workspace is really important. Like, so I've got my workspace is underneath me here. It's like my garage. But just walking the kind of 10 meters down through the garden from the living room down to my studio is like the hardest walk to do. And so but once I'm in there, then I'm just so full of joy and excitement and enthusiasm, because it's like, yes, now I've got to make this, I've got to do this. So I think it's just getting yourself to your workspace, whatever that is, if it's just sitting at your desk, opening a thing, whatever. The other like small tip, maybe a weird tip, is that which is quite helpful, is that if you struggle with this, it's quite good sometimes to not finish a task at the end of the day. So that, say if you're, I don't know, like sculpting a head, like don't finish sculpting the head at the end of that day, so that the next day when you come back to it, you've still got to like finish the hair or something like that, just so that you don't have to come in cold and be like, oh, I've got to work out how I'm going to do the body and I don't know how to do that. So if you can just, it's the same thing as like writing. Some people say just copy out a passage just to get your hands typing, and so then you'll be in the mode of writing, so you can kind of flow from that. And it's the same sort of thing, like just make it easy on yourself to go into work in the morning.
That's such a brilliant tip. I'm going to take that away. I love it. And I love the fact, I mean, obviously you've got your studio downstairs. I like the bit of sort of like slip earlier that you've locked your sound guy in the basement. Obviously that's, he's allowed in the house occasionally.
In the same house.
So that obviously helps. But there's a question from Harry. What software do you use for stop motion? And I'd add on to that, what other kit have you got set up in your studio?
Yeah, so I use Dragonframe. So I've got a Canon 5D Mark II camera, which is linked to my Mac, which has got Dragonframe, which is the kind of industry standard software, like Aardman use it, Leica use it. And it's good. It's a one-off payment. It's not one of those like rental things. So it's like, I don't know, it's like 200 quid or something, and then you get free updates for life, I think. So it's just, it's good, it's worth it. And then I've got like a few different tripods, like so like one for static shooting, one for overhead shooting, so it's like on an arm. I've also got a slider, like a motion control made by Edelkrone slider, so I can do moving shots and pans and tilts. And then I've got like 4 or 5 quite cheap lights, like they're like softbox studio lights, they're like multi bulb ones, so you can control the amount of light that's that you're getting, and that's pretty much it.
Sounds amazing. And then what's the kind of, is this to add on that, ballpark cost, do you think, for setting up an animation studio in your basement?
I mean,
too hard a question, because obviously it depends on the quality.
I reckon you could probably, not everything that I've just mentioned, but I reckon you could probably do it for about £1,000 maybe. I mean, there's,
okay.
Yeah, you could. I mean, you could probably do it if you wanted to. You could just get. I mean, actually, scrap that. You could do it on your phone and with like LED lights that you can get from B&Q, with like cereal box backdrops, and with a free stop motion app that you can get on iPhones. So you could do it if you've got a phone and sort of 20 quid, you could do it.
Yeah.
But if you want to the whole
progress. Time. Yeah. I mean, that's really, it's great to have that really lo-fi start. And obviously it's a privilege to have a basement and do all of those things. But that's maybe something to like aspire to. That links with a question from William. What would you say are your necessary tools for experimenting and planning in animation before financially committing to materials for a project? So I guess what William means there is not so much the kit, but maybe the models and the sets and the costumes. I think that's what.
Yeah, I mean, so the first bit of the question is that what do you use for planning and experimentation?
Yeah, so like before financially committing to it, what would you use to maybe storyboard it? And
I say storyboarding is the thing is the main thing. So pen and paper is what you need, because basically you can design a character all you want, but until you storyboard, you won't know what range of actions they'll need to do. And so once you've storyboarded it and you know, oh, actually, they have to do this, so their arm needs to move all the way over their head, so they can't have that shoulder bit or whatever it is, you know. So you need to storyboard, so you need to know the range of their actions. And also you'll find that through storyboarding, you'll get to know a lot more about their character, and that will inform material decisions and sculpting decisions. And then in terms of like progressing to like research and development in 3 dimensions, I tend to use, if I need to just test stuff out quickly, I use styrofoam a lot, because you can sculpt really quickly and it's very light and cheap. So I'll sometimes just do like styrofoam heads, styrofoam bodies, like furnishing foam. You can just like cut furnishing foam into shape really easily. And sometimes, you know, like sometimes you just make stuff really, you know, so like I had to make a test badger to pitch to the, so basically I got my interview for quarantine with the BFI, so it's BFI and BBC4 scheme, and they called me into interview. I think it was like, they called me on like Monday and I had until Thursday. They were like, oh, we'd really like to see a puppet. I was like, okay, I'll just knock a puppet up for you like in 3 days. And so, yeah, I just made it out. I made like really rough, like styrofoam head and like snip foam body, just like really simple wire armature. And then I just covered it. I didn't have any fabric. We don't have fabric shops in Folkestone. I couldn't get any fabric. So I just covered it in an old pair of tights. I like cut up an old pair of tights and sewed it together and covered the badger. And it got me the job. So
fantastic. I know that there were some photos or a short clip or not. We haven't looked at them yet, but I think that might be a good moment.
Yeah,
so,
yeah, sure. If you want to look at the photos, I was actually going to talk about this when we were talking about fixed face puppets. Just because this maybe is like useful. So this is from quarantine. So this is just from one really short scene, and just to show the range of kind of emotions just through like body language. And I make like little eyelids out of Fimo and then paint them the same color as their eye surrounds. So you can just see, so here he's just got like a little sad eyelid. So yeah, so this is kind of like reflective, pensive. And then if we go to the next image, and then he realizes that the accordion's gone. So you just remove so it's just a very slight adjustment of the body language. So that's kind of like surprise or shock. So you remove the half eyelid, so it's like full eye open. And then if we can go to the next, and then looking for somebody, so half lid is back, you know, so you just turn the puppet. So like there's no facial expression here, it's just an eyelid and an eyeball. And the way the hand is. So he's looking for somebody, and then the next still is like there's like another little eyelid underneath as well, which is the kind of narrowing of the eye, like so yeah, I just want to show that just really, really simple things can just help like sell a moment.
I love that, and I guess that's the thing, like in feature films, they say the whole thing about acting is doing less for the big screen, and there's a comparison there. Thank you, that was brilliant to see the work. So we've got a couple more questions to get through. We're running out of time. There's a question from Zeb. How does the experience of being a staff writer on a show compare to directing your own films?
Oh my God, it's such a dream. It's such a dream. Like I started doing it, I was like, why didn't I do this before? It's so easy. I mean, no, it's not easy. It's really intense work, but it's my favorite kind of work. I think it's you get to like go to London, sit in a room full of snacks, talking about dinosaurs with funny people all day, and just coming up with stories. And it's just really, it's so fun and just enjoyable. And I think I think it would feel quite different if it was my own show, if I was like show running or head writer or anything like that. But I think because like sometimes it's really nice to not have that responsibility and just to come in and just try and do your best work to try and help another project, you know, develop. But yeah, it's actually, when you're working on your own stuff, it's actually really, really nice to have to just go and do some other work on something that you're not so personally invested in. And yeah, it's amazing.
Brilliant. So I mean, and that is Bad Dinosaur, right, from Netflix, that example, is that right?
It's Bad Dinosaurs. Yeah.
And is that out yet?
No, they've no, it's in production, so I think it's out next year.
Right. Because just to quickly flick to some of the work, we've put the link to Quarantine in our newsletter, but also the recommendations from Astrid. Check them out. They are awesome, and again, they're quite sort of serious examples. But there's The Burden, there's This Magnificent Cake, and there's Buñuel in the Labyrinth of Turtles. So do check those out. And that links to the last question I've got. There's still time for any more, if anyone wants to put them in, from Fisayo. If I've mispronounced that, apologies. I'm a freelance documentary filmmaker and love animation. I will love to make an animation documentary. Where do I start in terms of learning about writing and directing animation? So I guess some like books or films or any reference points that would be great for someone starting out.
Okay. So I mean, I think in terms of stop motion, I can really recommend a book by Susanna Shaw, I think her name is, which is like, I can't remember what it's called, but it's basically like a craft book that teaches you all the skills you need to know about puppet making, all that stuff. In terms of like cell animation, drawn animation, there's a really good Richard Williams book. It's like a classic. But also I would just say, if you're like coming at it as a complete novice and beginner, probably the best thing to do is just to talk to somebody who knows about it. So somebody who is an animator, even if they don't have time to collaborate with you and actually work on it, just to chat with them about kind of, and I mean, also, you know, Google, I've learned so much from Google and chat forums. You know, I kind of taught myself cinematography through Google. So yeah, I'd say they are good things to do. Otherwise, you know, like adult education, like short evening class courses, like there's probably a ton of them out there. If you've got like, you know, 150 quid or something like that, then you can probably just, kind of get yourself in and running.
That's brilliant. And thank you for doing that on the spot. It's like, let's have a reading list, please, immediately. Amber, I'd like to, if you're there, come back, because we've just got like the last bit. And really, it's to sort of say thank you both. And I mean, I feel like I've had education in working in animation straight there. But there aren't any more questions. So it's whether, Amber, you have another question or not, or whether I get to ask the last question. So,
I mean, I think you go for it. I have one, but I think you deserve it. Go for it.
I will go. So the whole process of animation, and you mentioned earlier about when you were a model maker, like attaining perfection. And I'd like to ask both Amber and Astrid this. How, as artists, screenwriting and directing, what's your relationship with perfectionism?
I think it's like in a way, it's like the killer of creativity. I think it's weird. It's a weird one because actually I get accused a lot by other people of being a perfectionist and you know, being a control freak and, oh, you know, blah blah blah. I don't view myself like that at all, and I find that really weird. I think that I have quite high standards in terms of the way I want things to look, but I don't think that's, I think the idea of perfectionism or something being perfect is weird. And I think that, like, definitely in terms of animation, everyone talks about this, that if you can see the artist's hand in there, I mean, not literally their hand, but you know,
continuity.
That's what people respond to. It is a form of acting, and I think that it's just a way of imbuing a static form with life. And I think that, you know, life is not perfect, it's like messy and amazing, and I think that should flow through your animation as well, whether it's a puppet or drawing or computer animation or whatever. Then yeah, I think that's my view. Amber?
It's hard to follow that. I think for me, so I used to make a lot of short films, like almost all live action short films, and write. And then, as Julie said at the very beginning, I've been working a lot with Watersprite Film Festival from the inside, supporting other filmmakers. And I think for me, I'm in a bit of a stuck position of, I spent the last few years like working on things like the mark scheme for how to define what makes the best film, and, you know, breaking down ways of literally judging different sort of projects people have worked on and different like amazing films. And I think that process has slightly scared me, because now I think I've had so many discussions about what makes a good film, and I've seen so many amazing ones from all the incredible filmmakers who submit to Watersprite. I'm now a bit scared to sort of start again. So I think that's something that in my sort of slight break away from the film festival world, I was definitely trying to do again and starting to do again. So I think I just need to sort of get over myself and not worry so much.
Lock yourself in your garage for 8 years.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
Thank you. And that's real insight. And I think, you know, lots of people will identify what you said, Amber, including myself. So it's a real inspiration for us all to get back in the garage, but also what you said, you don't have to share it all so publicly. You know, there's a difference between drafts and final draft, and in this Instagram age, maybe if you're starting out, protect yourself a little bit with your precious art before you open it up to all the criticism and the public. So fantastic. Well, we've run out of time. Thank you so much for all the questions. Thanks, Amber. Thanks, Astrid. Have a lovely evening. Thanks for the inspiration.
Thanks.